Welcome to Rock'N Blues Revue. Today we are very fortunate to welcome one of the great blues guitarists of all time. Guitar Player magazine ranked him the top 4 players in the world, and during a Rock One radio interview with Eddie Van Halen, he was asked how does it feel to be the best guitarist on the planet, and he said, "I don't know. Ask Chris Duarte." So we are about to welcome Chris to the show. We are welcoming today one of our favorites, Chris Duarte, who has been in Canada at the Canal Bank Shuffle a few times. He is now coming back to Brampton in August, and it is great to see him back in Canada. How's it going, Chris?
It's going great, Bob. Thanks for having me. And like I said, I always love coming into Canada.
And we were just before we got going, we were talking about your new album, and I was asking if you're consciously making changes or is it just evolving?
Well, I think it's evolving, but it's Dennis Herring's sort of vision too. We have like a collaborative thing going. Dennis Herring, of course, did Texas Sugar. He also did my Romp album, the fourth album. And Dennis is he's just a wizard. I just love working with him. He's one of my favorite producers to work with. And he just has this, I just don't know how he does it, but he just has this great mind for doing all this stuff.
Yeah, and I just saw, I think it was Blues Rock Review, who I'm also writing for. They did your last album, but they also just did a great 90s great blues albums, and yours was in the top 10 there, speaking of Texas Sugar.
I didn't know that. Well, that's great. I mean, Texas Sugar was a special album. It is a special album. I wish Silvertone was still making them, but I've always thought it was a special album. The Japanese did a little remastered version of it, which I have a copy of, and it just has this special sort of vibe to it. And Dennis really captured it.
And do you have a favorite album?
As I tell everybody, they're all my children. I love them equally. But I always say to people, if you don't have any of my albums, start with Texas Sugar, then start looking at the rest of them.
That's very diplomatic and
Well,
well
I
said.
mean, I want to try to get, them interested in what's going on because if you do go back and review a lot of my albums, especially start looking at the seventh and the eighth and the ninth album, there's a real change in the styles. I mean, there's some regrettable songs. You always have that once in a while when you have time constraints and you can't go back and fix everything you want to fix. But that's the way it is, and I'll stand by everything that I put out.
Well, I think that's the way to do it. And yeah, you're right. You got to get people, and it's the same as looking up influences. You hear something and you investigate more. So yeah, there's no sense. I don't think pointing to one specific spot and saying go there.
Right.
Start there.
Right. And me, it's not to say that I want to flex my musical muscle, but I just want to explore different avenues. And fortunately, when I was with Mike Varney, there was like a string of those that I did on Blues Bro International. Mike Varney would he'd let the leash go a little and he'd let me get real creative on some of the songs.
And you mentioned Japanese. You're very popular there. Any reason for that, you think?
I think Texas Sugar just hit real well, and I've sort of managed to hold on to a core following over there. And the Japanese people are very astute listeners, and I just going over there is just such a great experience.
Yeah, so you've done this before because astute listeners, I think, is a great term because I think that applies to you a lot. Player like you have your solid core following all the time. And like, we mentioned the Canal Bank Shuffle, and one of my pet peeves is local artists not coming to see people that we bring in from around the world and learn something. But when you were there, the room was full of guitarists.
It humbles me that my peers would come out to see me play because I try to get out and see some of them if they come down in my neighborhood because I want to show them support and I want to show them that I'm interested in what they're doing as well.
Yeah, and they should too, and that's great. And your live shows are so different than most people's. You know, you've been called ferocious, and I think that's fair. Uh,
Hmm.
you put on such a show, and you work so hard all the time. How do you keep it up?
Well, number one, you have to love what you do, and I do love what I do, and I love being on the road. I love staying out there. I always tell my agents, if you can keep me out there 8 weeks, 10 weeks, fine with me. I just get into a good routine. Plus, it makes me practice more, and every night that I play, I'm always applying myself. So I feel like I'm learning more when I'm out there on the road too.
That brings us back to the beginning. What influenced you? Because you've got a lot of different factors in there. You're not playing straight 145, 12 bar blues. You got a lot of stuff in there, a lot of mixes. You know, what are your influences and how did you get into them? How did you start?
Well, of course, it started off with the Beatles, of course, way back in the day, like a lot of us guitar players did. And then as I started to develop my own taste, I started getting into the rock that was there because I was in San Antonio and I was influenced by my environment. And San Antonio was pretty much a metal town, but who I gravitated towards was like Black Sabbath and AC/DC. And I sort of went from there. And then when I got into around 15, I was a busboy at a restaurant and they had jazz there. And I started listening to jazz. And that's when I started getting to Coltrane and Charlie Parker and Miles Davis. And then the fusion guys, of course, I came up in the 70s. So I was there during all the fusion years of Mahavishnu Orchestra with John McLaughlin and Return to Forever and Al Di Meola, Alan Holdsworth, and then Miles's fusion time, Keith Jarrett. I mean, the list goes on and on. The people that I loved in the fusion days.
Yeah, and you can hear it. But more than that, I think what's really unique, people should see you live because for me, that guitar looks like it's a part of you. I don't know how you physically throw it around, bring it back to yourself, your hands land, and away you go. It looks like it was well choreographed between you and the instrument, and it's just very unique.
Bob, what I try to do is I try to play how I feel that night. Sure, I might be telling some of the same stories on the same on songs, but I'm trying to interpret it the way my feelings are that night and how I feel, like opening up a window to my soul that people can see. And that's why I have people follow me around for show after show because they know the next show is not going to be the same as they just saw.
Yeah. Like I said, you've got that hardcore following, and but I think the last time we saw you in Buffalo, it was uh, you were a little bit tired that night, but that show did not convey any tiredness. You still turned it on.
uh, that's the only way I know how to play. It's the music that moves me, and that's it. Doesn't matter how tired I am, I'm still going to go out there and, like I say, apply myself. Just play as hard as I can, try to stretch for new things, and work on ideas. And some of my best gigs have been to just tables and chairs because I know I could stretch out and do like whatever and work on things. And sometimes it really works out, and sometimes it's a terrific failure. But I learned from my mistakes.
Well, uh, nobody puts on as much work as you do. I don't. I mean, I've seen hundreds of players over the year, hundreds, and I don't think anybody works as hard as you. And certainly people appreciate that. But have you set a standard now that your fans are going to expect forever?
Sometimes I think I've painted myself in a corner because I play so physically. And as I'm getting advanced on in my years, it's like, can I keep this sort of stamina up? And right now, I'm grateful for the health and the spryness that I have. But, who knows when there comes a time where I might have to start, mellowing out a little bit. But so far, that day hasn't come. So I'm just going to keep playing just as hard as I can and just keep trying out new ideas as I go along.
Yeah. Well, that's um, now as far as your live performances. you're pretty much you love the trio configuration. Do you ever think you'll change that to a four piece or another singer or something different in that lineup?
I wouldn't mind getting a keyboard or even a sax player in the band. And I think unfortunately it's been financial reasons that I haven't expanded the band. But I still love playing in a trio and the harmonic freedom that it allows me to have. I don't have to worry about stepping on somebody else's rhythm. But I love playing with keyboard players. Every time I jam with one, it's it's a whole new experience for me. But right now, it's just finances dictate that I shall be in the trio.
Yeah, no, and I get that too. And we run into that a lot. We had a lot of local guys who, try to expand, to bring in three or four horns. And it's really hard, especially in this climate. Live music and recording is really tough these days. And I think that some of the other reviews I read on your album, you're kind of mentioning, ain't giving up is part of that. Uh, how much tougher is it now getting your music out there and recording and, with no record companies to speak of?
You know, um, really, the opportunities are really it's not that hard to get your music out there with social media. It just depends how savvy you can be with social media. And unfortunately, much to the chagrin of my record labels and my agencies, I'm terrible at social media. I'm still one of those old school guys that thinks that my hard work and my determination to my craft will speak for itself. But that isn't always true. And I've been trying like the Dickens to get better at social media, but I always go back to my old ways and just think, just got to keep playing harder, Chris. Play hard, keep on out there doing it. It does get tough because you'd have to present yourself as some sort of financial viability for clubs to have you and to want to bring you back. As nice as a guy as that I am, at least I think I am. They'll have me back, but it's a business and they need to make some money at it. But fortunately, I've been able to carve out a niche out there where people have supported me for quite a while.
Yeah, no, and I think you definitely have a reputation as a nice guy. There's no question there, and that does help. Uh, you know, like I said, we ran that festival for 20 years, and summer one after that. And to me, anyway, the personalities were important. I really enjoyed the guys who were easy to get along with. Fortunately, most of them were.
Yeah.
But I remember you had in your rider about you wanted a private washroom, which we couldn't really accommodate. But it was hilarious because we just physically didn't have that in the hall. And it was a 400 seat theater
I
or
remember
hall
the
or
venue.
hall, right? Yeah, it wasn't a great hall, but I remember you were in the washroom and two guys were leaning over you trying to get your autograph, and I thought, oh, that's why he wants a washroom.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's just that little bit of me time that I need to focus in and get my thoughts together so I can go out there and put the best show forward. Believe me, I've operated in all kinds of conditions and I'll make anything work. It's not gonna pull a rock star tantrum out of me that I don't have a washroom. I mean, usually my rider is just utopian conditions and I'll work with anything that a club will make an earnest effort to get me.
Yeah. No, and you were very gracious. You were very nice to the guys. So you just made them wait a minute or two.
Right,
But
exactly.
But just getting back to the social media, if it's any consolation, I think you are way more visible than you were a few years ago. I used to look for your videos and had a hard time finding a decent one. There are lots of good ones out there now, so it's certainly much better than it was.
Well, maybe the quality of the camera people have gotten better
Yeah,
or the production quality's gone up. But I'm very fortunate that I do have fans up there that take that extra effort to make it look good and they want their product to look good as well.
yeah. And I think it's important that you understand and appreciate that too. You know, there's a few out there, not too many anymore, who don't really like uh, a whole bunch of people videoing or shooting, but I think it does help with promotion over time.
At my level, it can only help. I mean, if I was a huge star, I get it that, if you're Metallica or some huge, that's a penny, a play they're losing. I get it, but at my level, anything helps, and I welcome it.
Well, let's talk about your level. I think you are the epitome of talent, not necessarily conveying popularity. Because you're playing the smaller and medium-sized venues, and you are regarded as a giant talent. How do you rationalize that to yourself?
I've had vagaries and transgressions in my past life, like a lot of us stars have, and I just have to be realistic about what's happened in my life. But I've moved on. I've gotten that in my past, and I'm just going forward, and that's all I can do. I'm not just going to muddle and say woe is me, because I'm just going to keep moving forward. Do I wish I had a bigger bank account? Sure, who doesn't wish that? But all I want is just financial security and just to be comfortable. I can live like a church mouse. I'm comfortable with just the most modest means. So if something great comes along, I can make it last for a while, or I'll just work. It's not to say that my working ambitions is only going to go so far. No, I want to work and have world domination, of course, but I'm grateful for whatever comes my way, and I'm not going to be bitter about if I think I'm a talent deserving more recognition.
Yeah, I think there's obviously certain things within your control and or not, but it is interesting that everything I've ever read or heard and seen, because I've seen hundreds and hundreds of players now. I mean, I'm old,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and even the Canal Bank itself, we had 30 acts a year for 20 years. And
Yeah.
that's just ours. And they've been to dozen. So, yeah, you're definitely up there in talent and certainly workmanship. The only thing I have a problem with is people try to compare you to other guys, and they're doing that to try to give other people, new people, an idea of what they might expect to see you. But I've never heard a description that quite nails you down yet. Do you have someone that you would compare to, or what you would say, well, I
You
expect
know,
something like this?
well, I'm certainly not Coltrane. I mean, there's only one Coltrane. There's only one McLaughlin. There's only one Mike Stern. But I think if people are having problems nailing me down, I guess they're just going to have to resign to the fact that I'm an individual, and I have my own individual sort of voice out there, which I've always said is one of the furthest goals, or the most ambitious goal that a musician could try to obtain, is their own voice. So they're instantly recognizable when they come across the radio. And that's what I'm always striving for, is my own voice. And I think to a large degree I've probably achieved that, because if people can't pigeonhole me into something, or they think I sound too derivative of something but they can't quite nail me down, I think that's because I stand on my own.
Right.
And I hope they come to that conclusion, or at least if history will judge me as such.
Yeah. And that's why they need to see you live. And I get that. And you said, pigeonholed and derivative. Yeah, you're none of those things. And I think that's why everyone struggles to and like I said, they're just trying to say, well, he's like this because you've never seen you before, kind of thing.
Right, that's exactly right, Bob. They're just trying to convey to their friends, because their friends have no idea what I'm like, or how to best describe me. And so the Stevie Ray Vaughan term is thrown out. The even the Hendrix or Jeff Beck, or he's trying to be like McLaughlin, or even Robin Trower. I don't mind that comparison. I mean, I love all those players. And I can only hope to achieve some kind of a long lasting legacy like all those aforementioned artists have got.
Right. And you just mentioned several of my favorites right in that sentence. And they do have signature sound for sure. Those guys, especially Beck and Trower, the first few bars, you know who that is. But the other thing I'm interesting that you mentioned Jeff Beck, everyone says he's the best, he's the greatest, and it's so subjective and it's art, you can't do that. But I will say for me, when someone says who's the most unique guitarist, two names come to mind, Jeff Beck and you.
Well, that's very humbling. Uh, uh, I try to be unique. Like I said, I try to be my own thing. And Beck is definitely he was one of my heroes, and he'll always be one of my heroes. Just because Beck seemed to never rest on his laurels. He was always trying to. He wasn't reinventing himself, but he was always looking for new ways to get from A to B, and he was always coming up with these great sonic ideas. He had his stuff was very, when you sort of analyze it, it was very simple when you look at the way he approached chords, but it's the touch he had and the phrasing and just the way he thought, the way he thought about music. It was just so unique.
Yeah, and I don't think he ever worried about the size of his following. You know,
No, Beck didn't even care about how many. I mean, I don't know. I didn't know Jeff Beck, but I mean, he didn't have songs where he wrote all the songs off all the CDs, which because Beck would take any song and turn it into his own. I mean, all those songs Stevie Wonder wrote for him, he turned them into big mega hits. Uh, Beck, I mean, even that the Rod Stewart songs. Sure, you remember Rod Stewart, but you remember that was Beck. Beck turned them into like his songs,
right.
and that's what you remember on all those songs is the solo he laid down on it.
So you mentioned a bunch of guys, and obviously their influences, and you'd probably like to go have a beer with them. Is there anybody you'd like to get in the studio with?
A lot of my artists, unfortunately, are kind of they're passing away because all the artists that I grew up with, they were just older than me, and so unfortunately, a lot of them are passing on. I believe Sonny Rollins is still alive. I would love to do something with Sonny Rollins. I would love to do something with McLaughlin. I would love to do something with actually I would love to do something with Kingfisher. I think Kingfisher's great. He's just that really well done blues rock style, and he's doing very well. Um, uh, Matt King, I believe that's the other guy. He's got some great stuff coming out. Uh, I've played with Samantha Fish before. I think Samantha Fish writes really great stuff. And these are the new cats. Mike Zito, of course, and Albert
Mm,
Castiglia. I've
mm.
known those guys forever, and they're doing really well. So, I mean, I would love to collaborate with those guys. And of course, Tab, I've known Tab for years. I love Tab as well. There's a lot of people I'd love to do, but then
Yeah.
there's a lot of jazz kits I'd love to do something with. But, I'm not really a jazz guy, so I don't want to bring them down to my level, you know.
I don't think that would
Well, I
happen.
actually played on that one album, My Soul Alone. We had that violin player come in, and Mads Tolling, and he had played with Stanley Clark, and I really think he came down to my level because that guy was pretty amazing. So because he made me sound good too, and that was instead of burying me with his technical proficiency or expertise, or his virtuosic ability. He didn't bury me with that. He kept on the same level. So I thought that was very gracious of Mads to do that. Great guy too. Mads is a great guy.
Yeah. Well, I think it's gracious of you too. But I think that someone like that, like yourself, would appreciate the honesty and the genuine effort of whoever they're playing with, and of course you wouldn't try to, bury them.
Yeah, I mean you got to be gracious and you got to play for the music. I mean, if that's your if that's your ambition or if that's your goal to just bury everybody, it's all about me, it's all about me. It's just for me, I think it poisons your core and it's going to poison your music. And, people can pick up on stuff like that. And I don't want to be that type of player. I want to be more of a generous player, more of a collaborative player that's working in the music's best interest.
So, of all the things you're doing, touring, writing, studio work, do you have a favorite? Or do they all, would you rather be writing somewhere or in a studio?
You know, when you get in the studio and you start working with the studio magic and you start turning those buttons and trying out ideas, there's really something special about that. Um, I know you can do a lot of stuff now in a bedroom with a laptop, but there's nothing like being in a real studio when you've got a real console, you've got nice outboard gear, you have good, amplifiers to play through. There's something special about that feeling when you're in there creating art, and that's what I call it. Not just music, but it's art because you're working towards a vision. At least that's how I view it. Uh, but I still love getting out and playing live, and playing live has got its certain requirements to make it the best. I mean, you want to be out there with really good musicians that can react with you and you can carry on musical conversations with. Some people, it's hard to carry on a musical conversation with, and that's what I thrive for. I thrive for carrying on a conversation. It's more of an interactive sort of thing instead of me telling a drummer, you just groove there, and I'll just play over you where you're just grooving. No, I want them to react with me because it's almost like an organic tribal sort of thing. That's how music was like that. It was communication, a long time ago between tribes, and then it became like a universal language. And that's what I love the most when I'm playing with somebody is when I click with them and I start carrying on conversations. I think that's what makes the music much more exciting.
Mhm. And what does the writing process look like for you?
It's still, I wish I was like one of those really heavy cats, but I'm really just a basic guy. I hear a melody in my head and I start working on that melody, and then I'll get the melody down, and then I'll think about putting a subject to that melody if it's going to have lyrics to it, and then come up with the rhythm, and then I hand it over to a drummer to see what kind of ideas they have for it. And sometimes I have to direct them to what kind of direction I want it to be in, the beat, or they've just got that connection and they hear my vision where it's going. Bass players I normally don't have to worry about. They pretty much, unless it's something really bad, I'll have to step in and correct that. But most bass players I've played with, they always have like they're playing what's right and what I hear is right.
Mhm. And do you worry about the studio version of the album versus the live, or is it a lot of improv?
No, I mean it really depends on the recording and what you're going for. It's like Texas Sugar. That's when Dennis came out and he saw two of our shows and he made notes about what songs he'd like to put on the album. And he got it right off the bat. He said what makes Chris special is his live performances. So
Right.
that's what he wanted to try to capture as an album that would be like a live performance. And I mean, like Shiloh, I mean, I listen back to Shiloh and I kind of shake my head and I'm like, wow, that's really me. That we really did that. Um, it's stunning. And then sometimes it's so stunning we're having so much fun, and we're telling stories in between takes. And then when we've done the album, we can't believe the amount of work that we got through because all we remembered was we were sitting around telling stories and laughing and having a good time or doing a little bit of editing. We weren't actually laying down tracks, but it does the more you stay at it and be real steady with it, you know, it's before you know it, you've achieved a lot of stuff in the studio. And yeah, time can fly in the studio when when you're having fun. I mean, the old adage is right. I mean, it just goes by. Next thing you know, you've been in the studio for 12 hours and you've got 3 or 4 songs up, which is actually pretty productive if you can do 3 or 4 songs in 12 hours. But normally it's one, maybe two. But that, you know, there's something about the studio. But then, like I said, I love getting out and playing live because the situation is so fluid, things could change.
And you said you've been busy and you're happy about that. How many shows are you doing typically a year now?
It usually always gets close to 150 to about 185, somewhere around there. I know that sounds real specific. I don't know what made me land on that number, but it's usually between 150 and 200.
No, no, that's quite a few shows. It's, it's, and I assume you'd like to, you know, you mentioned 8 or 10 weeks. You'd like to clump them into areas and keep it local.
Yeah, I mean that's just for the efficiency of it. You know, you want to hit an area and you want to really not saturate the area, but you want to play in there well enough to get around to a lot of people. Like LA, I don't know why people have a proximity clause in LA. LA is so huge. You can play 4, 5, 6 times in the LA area and you'll never touch another crowd or a region because it's not segregated, but it's just so huge. You'll have barely you'll have the 1 or 2 fans that might see you 4 or 5 times in the area, but more than likely you'll have a new crowd every time, and that's just you. That's how you tour more efficiently. You go into regions, and so East Coast has always been strong for me. The Midwest has always been a great breadbasket for me, and the West Coast has been the hardest nut to crack. But
Hmm.
I still have to keep going out there and working it if I'm going to build a better following out there.
Yeah. Any idea why that is?
It's just I haven't been out there enough. I haven't toured enough. Uh, if a CD hits or a song hits, that will help amazingly. It still helps. I mean, radio is still a big thing, or streaming, is still a big thing. So if one song hits, you'd be amazed at what it can do, even nowadays.
Yeah. And you've had some success with some of the cover stuff too. What hits you that makes you want to cover a song?
It's just it. I like it. That's why it rings something special to me. I mean, I've had some record companies that have put forth cover songs to me, and I've tried to do my best at it. I'm getting better at it because back then, if they gave me a cover version, naively, I would just sort of copy it like the way they gave it to me instead of putting my own interpretation to it. And I think that just came with age and more experience that I gathered because I was terrible at doing covers because I would just try to play it like what they handed me. And I don't think that's the way to look at it, unless it's one of those highly reverent songs that you have to pretty much do a heavy nod towards what's on that recording, do some reference to it because that's everybody knows that song is that, so you might as well try to make it kind of sound like that so
Hmm.
people can latch onto it better instead of just taking it and just turning it completely wild and something completely different.
Hmm.
uh, I don't, I mean, if I had the artistic freedom to do something like that, I would love to try something like that. But maybe I don't have the artistic talent in me yet to do something like that.
I don't know what I will tell you this. The last time I think we had you opened with Hideaway, and I think it was one of the best versions I ever heard.
Yeah, I'm just taking from what Freddie left for us and what Stevie left for us, and I'm pretty much playing kind of like the Stevie version, but trying to take it just a little bit further, if it can be taken further, because Stevie was quite an amazing player, and I still love the old Stevie. Of course, he got to be a real fire breather and he'd do some really fast stuff, but I still love some of that old stuff like out of the early 80s and all that stuff. It was just so raw and intense.
Yeah. Speaking of raw, the last time we chatted, you were beating up your hands pretty good. How are they holding up?
Actually, my hands are holding up pretty good. I mean, that I was having a yeah, they were cutting open on this last tour because I was playing them every night. Every night, the calluses were getting bigger and bigger, and if you don't keep them moisturized, the strings will cut right into them because they just get dry, and it just takes one strategically placed slide up and down the strings, and that string will cut right into it, and then now you're stuck with a cut on your finger, and you just have to play through the pain, which
Yeah.
I've done many, many times. But
Well,
uh,
yeah, I've read a few times about getting your hands bleeding, and I've seen it. I've got a picture of you with your hand bleeding, so I know it's true.
yeah, I mean, it's this last one I had like a real bad cut where I hold my pick on the index finger, and it was a cut right on it, and that was that that was the first 4 or 5 songs. I'd have to just sort of just man up and go through it, but after that, you wouldn't the pain wouldn't register until after the gig. That's when the pain comes in, but it's just part of the gig. I'm not complaining about it. It's just, in fact, I normally don't say anything about it.
All right, so we are almost out of time, and what you just heard, people, is the intensity. You have to get out and see Chris live, and he will be in Canada on August 9th in Brampton. So get up there and see him live. And thank you, Chris, for doing this. Really appreciate it. And we hope to see you soon. Hope to get up there.
Bob, thank you for everything you do. Thank you, people of Canada, for supporting me all these years. Uh, I love Canadians. Hopefully, I can work up a version of y'all's anthem. I love the anthem. It's a great one. And I look forward to being there, man. It's a great country.
Thank you so much. Take care. Talk soon.
You got it, Bob. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.